Welcome to Just Talking About Jesus. I'm Jan Johnson, a seasoned believer who loves relationships and, just talking about Jesus. Here you'll hear inspiring stories from a woman who went from using meth to starting a ministry in Kenya, or the man who had a life-changing encounter with someone in Home Depot, of all places, or a woman who has endured years of chronic pain after having her gallbladder, spleen, and pancreas removed. Every conversation goes deep into how God has changed lives and brought us to a place of surrender, sharing joys, sorrows, and just life in general. We don't have to go it alone because we can go hand in hand with Jesus on our journey. Jesus desires a relationship with us, with you. He wants to know us intimately. Revelations 12:11 says, "And they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony." That's what I'm talking about. The word of our testimony, just talking about Jesus. Join us each week.
One of the guys we worked with day in and day out was Flavio Tai, and he would talk about how he spoke some Spanish, but it was really his own language that really made the difference, and having the scriptures in his own language was really precious to him. And I think those of us that have it all the time, we have our Bibles all the time, we lose track of those people like this that don't have it and what it really can mean to them.
Welcome, my friends, to episode 83. Last week, we heard from David Scott, who floundered when selling cocaine and becoming an alcoholic, all the while creating a career as a chef. Certainly some but God moments in his story. If you missed it, go back and take a listen. If you are new here, welcome. I'm Jan Johnson, your host. I'm glad you're joining us, and I hope that by the end of this show, you feel encouraged and strengthened. And if so, please like and subscribe, because that way, if you subscribe, it'll always come right to your inbox as soon as they're out. My guest today is Terry Whalen. He grew up in a Christian home, but one day, while in college and working on a campus newspaper, his fingers just weren't working right on the typewriter. And as many of us have done in our youth, he used the Lord's name in vain. A girl sitting next to him called him out on it, and that conversation led to him going to a Christian bookstore, finding a book called Jesus the Revolutionary, one that changed his life. He told the Lord he would go wherever he led, which brought him to Peru and Guatemala with Wycliffe Translators. This is an intriguing story, so let's get right to it. Okay, welcome everyone to Just Talking About Jesus. I have Terry Whalen here with me today. Welcome, Terry.
Jan, wonderful to be here with you.
Yeah, I am kind of excited to hear your story. I mean, every time I start a podcast, it's just like, oh, where is God going to take this? This is so fun to see, see what it's got. So you had an encounter way back with maybe when you were in college with a small group, and it kind of changed your perspective of what maybe church and Christianity was about. You want to tell us about that?
Yeah, I thought I grew up in the church, Jan. I thought I was a Christian, baptized at a young age, all that kind of thing. We were in the church pretty much anytime the doors were open there to be at church. But I decided to go to Indiana University to study journalism, and I got on the big campus there, 30,000 students on the main campus, and I basically got lost as far as my beliefs go, which is pretty easy to do in a situation like that. I joined a social fraternity. I started going out drinking with my college buddies, and I'd been out really late one night, and I couldn't get my fingers on the right keys. I was writing for the campus newspaper, the Daily Student, and I was sitting there at my old Royal typewriter and just couldn't couldn't get the right keys out. And every time I made a mistake, I kept muttering to myself, Jesus Christ, Jesus Christ. And this little blonde-haired girl that was sitting next to me, there were about 30 of us sitting there all pounding our stories out. And she looked at me and she said, "Oh, Terry, don't say that about Jesus, because one of these days when you really need Jesus, you'll call out for him and he won't be there." And I thought, what's this? I'm a Christian. I go to church when I'm at home. I read the Bible in church when I'm at home. I had really no personal relationship at all, Jan. And so she encouraged me to go to this little bookstore, a couple blocks off the Indiana campus. They had pretty cards and posters, and maybe I'd find a book that interested me. So I wandered down there a couple days later, and I bought this book called Jesus the Revolutionary. I thought, how in the world could Jesus be a revolutionary? And at that time in my life, I was rebelling from, my upbringing and my faith and all that. So I took this little book back to my room and I read this book, and it showed me a different side of Jesus than I'd ever seen before. He was more than a praying figure in the Garden of Gethsemane or raising a hand and blessing kids or something like that. He was real. At about that time, some people invited me to this little Jesus people gathering in downtown Bloomington. They were sitting on scraps of carpets with little candles lit. And those people in that room had something that I didn't have. And so I got a Bible, changed the direction of my life. Back then, I was planning on being a newspaper reporter. So I was training to work at the Indianapolis Star, the Chicago Tribune, one of those kind of places. And instead, I joined this group called Wycliffe Bible Translators. My journalism colleagues thought I was totally nuts, because that's what we were all training to do, was to go write stories. And instead, I trooped off to Guatemala, Central America. I worked among the Southwest Kaqchikel people, made a lot of different decisions in my life. Actually have a master's in linguistics out of working down there, and left a lot of my writing behind back then. But then I wandered back to my writing, started writing magazine articles, and that's kind of where I've been ever since.
Interesting how God takes us from one little thing to the next. When you were with that group, that sounds like a 70s group.
It was actually in the 70s. And, the Jesus people movement was big back then, and people were coming to Christ. And I was right there in the middle of all that.
Yeah. It was kind of did you have the I found it bumper sticker?
I did. I actually worked on the I Found It campaign, and was a counselor on that whole campaign and everything. Yeah, back then.
What were some of the things when you started reading the Bible? What were some of the things that really struck you or opened your mind to really more who Jesus was?
Well, I was captured by the stories and the the whole gospel message, and it really just changed my life. And so I started reading the Bible every day and having devotions, and really changed what I was doing all the way around. As far as, I moved out of my fraternity. That didn't seem like the right place to be. So I didn't stay with those guys, but instead I joined a group on the campus, and, went with them and learned about, how to share my faith and all that kind of thing. So it totally transformed what I was going to do back then.
I just think it's fascinating just to hear where people change their paradigm. You're going along and you're just not thinking about things, and all of a sudden there's like God plants a little somebody or something that just opens the door. And it's just like he must have known that you were ready for that, at that time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that little blonde-haired girl that was sitting next to me is still one of my friends, even after all this time, 50 years later, we're still checking in with each other and all that. So those relationships that you form early on can be something that really lasts through all the years, which is amazing.
Because you also, not only are they watching you grow, you're watching them and feeding into their lives as well. And there's,
Absolutely. And I still have that little book. Here it is. It's
oh,
called Jesus the Revolutionary. And it's all yellow now and very, very old little book that I have, but I still kept this book. So it's been an important part of my life.
so this is a curious question. So as a journalist, as you're reading the Bible, did your mind kind of go like how you would have written it or how you, the accounts or how you would have reported on them?
No, I've never really wanted to do that. I have, I've written some devotions and some things, some thoughts that I have about the Bible out of all that. So I have done a few of those kind of books through the years, but as a kid, I was always fascinated with people's stories, and I think that's part of why I became a storyteller and a journalist. As a kid, I read a lot of biographies, and so now as an adult, I've written all kinds of biographies about people's lives, like Billy Graham and Luis Palau and Billy Sunday and a lot of those kind of people, because I believe their stories are very important to capture those stories and pass those on to other people.
Yeah, fascinating. When my first husband had a book that was, can't even think the name of it. I think I even have it still, but it was something called Chronicles or something. It was a great big book, but it was written in a journalistic style of recording the events of the Bible and whatever. Anyway, because he was interested in writing as well, but it was kind of a different take on how things are like that. So they probably could have been snippets in Instagram, you know?
Yeah, they could have been. There's a lot of different versions of the Bible, and so I've always been fascinated with that kind of thing. And I read in different versions. I don't know if you ever seen. There's even a Southern version of the Bible that was done called it's well the Gospel of Luke is called Jesus' Doings and Happenings, and it's instead of the Jews and the Gentiles, it has the North and the South, and it all these little colloquialisms are in that book. It's a very, very different kind of Bible translation.
It'd be kind of fun to read, actually.
Yeah, it is. It's fun. It's different.
Yeah, it's different. So tell us more about your experiences with Wycliffe.
Yeah, I committed my life to worldwide evangelism as a part of what I did in college. We went to this gathering called Urbana that was in Urbana, Illinois. And so at the final service of that thing, you stood and committed your life to world evangelism. And that's what I did back then. And so I looked at all these different missions and different ministries when I was there at Urbana. And the one that really stood out to me, and it's because I had a personal relationship with it, was Wycliffe Bible Translators. One of my friends in college, his parents were Bible translators down in Peru. And I was always intrigued with this guy. He was a different kind of guy. Even in the wintertime in Indiana, he didn't wear socks. He always wore sandals. And so, that made him stand out, as you can imagine,
Uh,
just there in the snow and all that kind of stuff. But I was fascinated with those experiences about how important it was to be able to give the Bible to people that didn't have it in their own language. And so that's why I was drawn to Wycliffe Bible Translators and why I worked in Guatemala those years and everything.
we've been to Guatemala 7 different times. We work with Unbound that has sponsored kids. And so we've got a number of families down there. So real familiar with Quechua.
Well, I was down there during some of the most violent years. I'm sure looking back, my parents wondered why in the world I would going off and doing this. But, we were cautious. We didn't go out at night and stuff like that. But it was during some of the most violent years in Guatemala. People were getting killed left and right by the guerrillas and all kinds of things. But, we felt called to be there, and God honored our work. I actually have a book on my shelf that wouldn't call it the Cachiquel New Testament. It's in Spanish and Cachiquel, which is one of the Mayan languages in Guatemala. This book wouldn't have existed, Jan, if I hadn't have made those kind of choices back then. And so I'm very, very glad that I made those kind of choices, and that book is in existence and people are still using it out there, which is great.
So did you actually work on the translations?
We actually worked on the early days, more of the linguistics part, and then we trained the translators and worked with them, who actually ended up finishing the New Testament. And then we went back in I think it was in 1990. Yeah, that's when this was dedicated, to go back to dedicate the New Testament with them and everything.
So as a man of stories, what stories do you have about the impacts while you were down there?
Oh, I think it's amazing, because as I would talk to people in Cachiquel, that's the language that we were learning back then. They would look on the surface like they were bilingual, like they spoke Spanish and all that, but they said, "Oh no, we don't. I mean, we kind of speak Spanish, but our language really is Cachiquel." And so I think it's getting the scriptures into that heart language that people speak, as they sit around their kitchens and all that kind of thing. That's the difference maker, I think, that happens in people's lives once they hear it in their own language.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you have any memory of specific people who, and their reactions, other than, just feeling validated for sure, but, just how maybe that changed them?
Well, I can think of, one of the guys we worked with day in and day out was Flavio Tai, and he would talk about how he spoke some Spanish, but it was really his own language that really made the difference. And having the scriptures in his own language was really precious to him. And I think those of us that have it all the time, we have our Bibles all the time. We lose track of those people like this that don't have it and what it really can mean to them. And so I think that can serve as not a warning necessarily, but just as a example for us to see that, sure, we need to be reading our own Bibles every day and looking at those stories and seeing how that applies in our lives, because there's so many people out there around the world that don't have that opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. What do you think about, I would think now it'd be way easier to translate just because of AI. Just let's delve into the AI a little bit, AI world a little bit here. Do you think that does somebody, if AI was used to translate, is there a human that goes back and says, "Yeah, this is right," or no?
Yes, there is. There's a human that has to check it all and make sure that it's all right. It's not just simply a machine to machine type of translation. But you're right. The whole translation world has changed a lot with all this, and it's getting rapid. The scriptures tell us that every person on the planet, before God comes back, before the Lord returns, will hear the scriptures in their own language. Mm-hmm. And so I think Wycliffe and their work is definitely a part of that whole movement. People have thought it's the last days, Jan, since Jesus left. So, right. We've all been thinking it's the last days, but that was 2,000 years ago. So, we got to be getting closer to it, however it works out.
Every day is definitely getting closer. Because there's a definite time when that he knows is going to happen. So tell me about other ways that God has built your character.
Oh, my character has been built through the years with all kinds of unexpected experiences that have happened in my life. So for example, I'm one of the few journalists that have actually ever interviewed Chuck Swindoll. I had lunch with Pastor Chuck,
Wow.
and he doesn't need the media, and doesn't like them a lot of times because they're not prepared when they talk to him and all that kind of stuff. I took a different tack. I actually showed him my story about him before it was published, and he said, "Oh, the journalists never do that, Terry," but I did, because I wanted it to make sure it was accurate and that it was something that sounded like the way he would sound. But I just had this amazing experience with him, Jan, because he was just so transparent with me about how in the body of Christ, there are no heroes. He said, we're all like a bunch of guys in the back of a pickup truck trying to get our stuff together. And I try to think of that, no matter who I meet, whether I meet somebody famous like Chuck Swindoll, or whether it's just somebody that crosses my path in my daily experiences. And I think each of these people that I met with like that have built just incredible experiences into my life, and how I'm responding to others, and all those kinds of things. So I think each of those experiences built character into my life. Even the life journey that I've been on. I mean, I went through a divorce years ago, which was hard. I mean, I was a missionary, and then I suddenly got served divorce papers, and so I had to deal with all that kind of thing. But I've been remarried now for over 30 years. And so, each of those experiences that we have in our life build that kind of character into our experiences and how we respond to the world. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think I have a friend who has a podcast called Eternal Echoes, and she only interviews older people just because she wants to know what their experiences were and what they had gained from, what God's done with them in their lives and how that could benefit younger people. And anyway, I love them. They're really fascinating, to hear just how God builds your character. I mean, you start at one point, and I mean, you're going to have something building your character one way or another. But look how rich it is, when it's a godly character, right?
Oh, absolutely. And those experiences, good and bad, that I've had in my life have built just incredible kinds of things. I mean, I've had the opportunity through the years. I've interviewed and written stories about, more than 150 best-selling authors. And so just that opportunity alone was huge in my own life. I mean, I wrote this biography about Billy Graham. I actually worked for Billy Graham about 35 years ago. I was an associate editor at Decision Magazine back when the office was in Minneapolis. We were doing 1.8 million copies of the magazine every issue. I mean, this little nondescript set of buildings in Minneapolis, people had no idea, but they would pull 6 or 7 semis full of mail out of that place every day. I mean, it was phenomenal what was going on there. And I had the opportunity to work with those people. I traveled to Managua, Nicaragua. I covered Franklin Graham's first overseas crusade. I was there with about a dozen people, watched to see how all that kind of thing worked. And it built a lot into my character, but my personal life as well, as I watched that. It was a little stand-up crusade in downtown Managua, Jan, that we were having. And, Franklin had never worked with an interpreter before. I mean, at this point in his life, he's a great experienced speaker, and people recognize him and all that kind of thing. But back then, he was a young guy, working with his first translator. And so as an evangelist, they always say, tonight I'm going to ask you to make a decision. And well, when he said those kinds of words, people started surging forward to accept Christ. And he was inexperienced. He didn't know what to do. So he looked around and the crusade director was sitting right behind him. He tugged on the back of his suit. He said, "Give the invitation, Franklin." And so, Franklin had this big, thick book. His daddy taught him to put his sermon like that. And so he flipped to the back, prayed, closed his book, turned around and left, which is he was supposed to do. And I stood there for hours afterwards. People were surging forward and accepting Christ. It was phenomenal to see that kind of thing. And I've had those kind of experiences throughout my life that changed because I bought this little book called Jesus the Revolutionary.
Yeah.
I mean, it's unbelievable to me.
Yeah. Just those little paths that God takes you on, and then who you encounter and how that changes. And, you're obviously a relationship type person, which to me, that's the best thing in the world is building relationships and having all of that, Yeah.
Well, we need each other. And so we really have to figure out how to connect to other people and then help them in any way that we can. I mean, years ago, when blogging started, for example, I started writing this little blog about the writing life that I have, and I just kept doing it.
Mhm.
And I think that's one of the keys. If you're trying to figure out how to build relationships, start something and then persevere with it is a key lesson, I think.
Mhm.
And so for my blog, I just kept writing these little blog articles once a week and putting them out there. Well, now, Jan, my blog has over 1,800 entries in it. And
Yeah.
I have this thing that goes out and searches for my name online. About a couple of years ago, I found this article that said there were over 600 million blogs that are out there. But this article listed the top 27 content producers. And I was one of those 27.
Huh.
And it's not that I'm doing anything fancy. I'm just blogging every week.
Yeah. Yeah. You're being consistent. Yeah.
I'm being consistent. And that ability to persevere and be consistent, I think, is one of the keys to finding your own way and your own niche out there in the world.
Yeah. 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 I'd agree with that totally. Yeah. What at this point in your life brings you the most joy?
Well, there's a number of things that bring joy to my life, but one of the great joys that I have is I'm still an acquisitions editor at a New York publishing house. So I'm still working with authors. They say that at any point in time, there's over 1 million submissions that are in circulation on people's desks and agents and editors and all that. So I have the opportunity as an editor that's worked in all kinds of books through the years to, mentor and help these writers that I'm dealing with, whether they ultimately publish with Morgan James or not, that's their choice. But I'm doing my part to help guide them understand that, their book has to be for a particular market and it has to be shaped in a certain kind of way for it to go. People don't understand that. I mean, I have people that pitch me children's books, for example, and they say, my book is for every child. Well, no, if you know anything at all about the children's market, I mean, there's a 3 to 6 market, there's a 6 to 8, you have to fit your book into those categories.
Yeah.
Otherwise, bookstores and librarians, they don't know what to do with your book. So if you don't know that, you're just going to trip around out there and get rejected forever if you don't really fit into what's going on in the market. So I have that opportunity to sort of mentor authors and help them figure out where to fit and how to get their book out there. And so it's been exciting to me to be able to have that opportunity with different authors.
Yeah. Yeah. Because you can see, you see their spark, and that keeps you going, right?
It does. And, there's people that are working on Christian books, children's books, devotionals, nonfiction. I mean, a whole array of different things. And if I can help them figure out how to get their book out there in the right kind of way and reach other people, then, I figure I've done what I'm supposed to do. And that does bring me a lot of joy and great satisfaction in the
Yeah.
process.
We're almost out of time, but it's almost Thanksgiving. You have a few tips about being thankful and showing thankfulness.
Well, my tip about Thanksgiving, Jan, would be that the gratitude is not just something that happens once a year, but really we need to figure out how to incorporate gratitude into our daily lives. So I personally, years ago, I started this daily gratitude journal.
Mm.
And so I open up a blank journal and I write several sentences in that every single day just to remind myself to be grateful. In 2 Thessalonians, we were talking about the last days earlier it's 2 Timothy. That's where it is. There's 2 Timothy 3. There's a list of terrible sins that happen during the last days. And in the middle of that, there's this one word that says ungrateful.
Mm.
And so that's the direction that our world's going. So as believers, as Christians, I feel like we need to walk in a different way and we need to express gratitude throughout our day, not just once a year on Thanksgiving.
Yeah, yeah. And even things like just sending thank you cards or things that are, little notes or things that are uplifting to people to let them know that you value those around you and whatever too, right?
It does. It makes a big difference to get
Yeah.
that kind of thing. And so I have I have a stack of thank you notes that I send. And so I pull those out and send one of those throughout the week, different times and
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
It's important.
It's kind of a neat little ministry in a way, too.
It is.
Terry,
It
thank
is.
you. This has really been fun and educational. I love seeing how your walk has been and just the people you've impacted throughout your life and whatever. It's really inspiring.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity, Jan. And that's why I have my personal email address right in my Twitter file right there in my profile, because I really do want to help people. So if anybody wants to reach out to me, take a look at that and reach out to me and see how I can help you. I'd love to do it.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you. It never ceases to amaze me how my guests are going along with their life and their limited beliefs, and one day the Holy Spirit snatches them and calls them to Him, and their lives are never the same again. If you happen to be listening and you've never had that Holy Spirit experience, it's right there at your fingertips, available for you too. Ask God to reveal Himself to you. He's just a prayer away. As you're sharing life with your friends and families, feel free to share a word about how much you enjoy this podcast. I would be ever grateful to share it with them. Oh, and if you're trying to figure out what to get those friends and family for Christmas, check out my website, jan-johnson.com. Mistletoe at Christmas Tree Lodge is a fun Christmas read. I Will Enter His Gates is my memoir, a rich read for guys or gals. And don't forget the romance series, A Nurse Foursome Looking for Love, Adventure, and the Meaning of Life. All are available on my website at jan-johnson.com and with free shipping. I'm sending blessings your way. I hope your Thanksgiving is magnificent, and we will see you next time. Do you have a friend or relative that would find value in this episode? Please share it. And you can let them know that if they'd prefer to watch, I always put these episodes on YouTube. So check that out in the show notes. And if you watch on YouTube, consider subscribing, because just as when you subscribe to this podcast and get notification when new episodes are out, the same will happen if you subscribe to my YouTube channel. just talking about Jesus. And then you won't miss an episode. Speaking of subscribing, are you getting my newsletters? These not only tell the guest stories, but also include pictures and links to the website and YouTube. I also add a little about my life, and who doesn't want to know that?